Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and a tabletop role-playing aficionado. And this is a rather unique video that's going to be a cross between a crafting stream and sort of a post-game chat. Mainly, I'm going to talk about Candlekeep Mysteries, the adventure that I ran for our New Year's Day game 2025. I'm recording this the day after, and I actually got to play physical tabletop Dungeons and Dragons, which I very rarely do. Almost all of my games are online via Roll20. I got to play it with friends and family on New Year's Day 2025. We kicked off the new year by playing Dungeons and Dragons, which was a ton of fun. I didn't have a whole lot of time to prep this game, so I wanted to run a pre-published adventure and something that was very low level because we had some new D&D players involved. So I played with Chris, who you all should very much recognize from my channel, one of my best friends, and has also DM'd for us. My wife Heather, who has also been with us for Dungeons and Dragons for pretty much the entire time that we've been playing D&D, as well as my sister, who has played one or two games with us before, I believe. In fact, I think one or two of them are on the channel that you can see in one shots. And then my oldest daughter, who has been introduced to Dungeons and Dragons and played a little bit, but this was going to be her first like full, I guess, group Dungeons and Dragons experience. So with this video, I want to just talk about basically how I ran this particular adventure and what kind of changes that I made and what basically I can tell you based on how that game ended up going. And I really did love this adventure. This is the very first one in Candlekeep Mysteries, called The Joy of Extradimensional Spaces. This is also going to be a big spoiler, so if you want to listen, so the other thing I can tell you is we recorded. We didn't do the whole. I don't have a good setup for doing a big tabletop, thing with cameras and whatnot. It's all on my PC for doing online games. But I did have the wherewithal to record the audio, and that audio will be available on my podcast. Just search Rogue Watson, or I will upload it to YouTube, but it'll just be kind of a static image, and you can listen along. The audio is not going to be, as nearly as good as if we had nice microphones and stuff, because it was kind of a last minute. Oh, let's try and record this, but it will be available. So if you want to give that a listen first, and then return to this video to get kind of my post thoughts, you can do that. Or if you don't want to listen to all that and just do this one, that's totally fine as well. So this is just going to be a quick video based on kind of the things that I learned about this, which, by the way, I did do a ranking video for all of the 17 Candlekeep Mysteries videos back when this anthology first came out, and I only ranked The Joy of Extradimensional Spaces like halfway in the ranking list, so I thought it was fine. And I think my ranking would be going up quite a bit, because I think this went really, really well for especially a newbie adventure, a low-level adventure. Had a lot of fun exploration with some good combat encounters. I really think it hit all the right notes, so I would definitely rank it higher if I were doing it again. And also, fun fact, this is the second Candlekeep Mysteries adventure that I ran. The first one I ran was Shemshime's Bedtime Rhyme as kind of a Halloween horror one-shot adventure in Halloween 2023 as a one-shot. So this is the second one. So I like running these anthology missions as kind of one-shot adventures. So we had a level 2 party. So that was one thing that I definitely changed in my adventure, is I leveled up everybody to 2. Even though we had some new D&D players and it would be beneficial to start at level 1, I also think level 1 is just really, really weak sauce, and it's hard, I think, to create some compelling, tense moments, especially around combat, and be able to just have a well-balanced adventure without feeling like you have to long rest during it or something. I just think, as much as I think D&D quickly gets way too powerful too quickly, I do think level 1 is just a little too undertuned for what you usually want to do in Dungeons and Dragons in terms of the kind of, threats and things that you throw at the party. So we ended up actually starting at level 2, which I think helped because the party never actually had to long rest, and they only had to short rest once. So they were pretty, and D&D 5e, they are pretty strong, but I was pretty satisfied by having them be at level 2. So I think that worked well, even with having some new players involved. Just for balance purposes, we had a cleric, a druid, a ranger, and a barbarian. So a very kind of defensive, tanky party in a lot of ways, which also I think helped allow them to survive a lot of attacks. The biggest thing I probably changed was, well, it says in the book that they have to actually make an Arcana check, I think, to open the portal when they first get to the library. Yeah, character succeeds on a DC 13 Arcana check, is able to decipher and find the command word scepter that opens the doorway. I guess otherwise the avowed, so you have to find somebody to help you. That's stupid. Like, just have them get to the, I montaged like a one shot. I kind of did an introduction that fast tracked the party to the thing. So I told them about, okay, you're all from the same village. You have to go help your village, which is all in the book. In order to, there's like a wizard that has helped your village in the past. Maybe he's from the village or likes the village or whatever. And he's at Candlekeep. So you have to go journey to him. You've already got the book that lets you get entrance to Candlekeep. You get up there, Avowed, shows you to the study. You're in the room. And then that's when I let the party have the space, and they kind of search around. They're like, okay, well, let's see if there's anything valuable, or, what's and there's just a single book on the table, which is this book, because all the Candlekeep Mysteries Adventures have to do with the book. And when one of the players is like, oh, I only cast Detect Magic as a ritual, and of course the book's giving off magic, and then of course one character's like, well, I'm going to open the book. So what I did is, as soon as you open the book, that triggers the portal. So when you open the book, that teleports everybody, and the Avowed's not there, they just drop them off. That teleports everybody into the mansion. So boom, there's no skill check involved in that, but I do let them explore the space for like, a little bit. So we teleport in there, and then the other big change that I made was that in the adventure, Matreus is there, the wizard, when they first appear, but it's kind of an awkward thing where he's startled when the characters appear, and he introduces himself as like, oh yeah, I got here first. He's got the imp figurine with him, and then he wants to explore the mansion, but he just walks out the door and teleports back, but then he's able to return back, but the players can't. It's kind of an awkward sequence, I guess, where you meet a character, but then they leave, but then you're stuck here. So I changed that to say, okay, Matreus did end up getting stuck in here, so the players do find him immediately, but he's a cat now. Because I was like, I want this NPC to stick around and be with them, but I don't want them to just have like this, mid-level wizard with them. So how do you go about that? Well, perhaps Matreus, was stuck in here like the players, but for his hubris or whatever, he's like, oh, let me just cast a teleportation spell to get out of here. And whatever DM reason that there's some security system here, which, like kind of Tomb of Horrors does that, where you can't teleport out of the tomb and ends up teleporting you somewhere else. Well, instead, maybe in this one turns you into a cat. So Matreus is a cat. I originally was going to have it be pretty obvious, like the door he's in is the one door that it was open before that he could explore. It was the study, which is true in the book, and that helps the party get started on what the main quest is, which I think is important. So right when they appear, they kind of learn about the 7 books and the command word and all that, and they get that from Matreus. But one thing I did enjoy was that because one of my players was a druid and specifically was excited about the whole Speak with Animals thing, she would love Divinity Original Sin and Baldur's Gate stuff with all the Speak with Animals stuff there. I was originally going to have the cat just be able to speak like a talking animal, like a Disney character or something, and he still has his power of speech like a wild-shaped druid would. But she was all excited to talk with the cat, so I was like, oh, okay, maybe only she can talk to the cat, and he's actually is polymorphed as a cat and can't speak. So, but because she casts Speak with Animals, now she's able to very importantly communicate with this NPC. But I would say if your characters don't have access to Speak with Animals, then obviously don't do that and just let the cat, speak common or whatever. But I thought that was a neat way of letting that character have a useful role in the party right off the bat and really be the translator. And the party did a good job of like, well, what are they saying? What's the cat saying and all this stuff? So they couldn't understand the cat, but only one character could, which I really enjoyed. I thought that was fun. So Matreus was able to tell them about basically it's a wizard's Fistandia's mansion and kind of a little bit of backstory and lore there, but there's not a lot involved. And thankfully, even if you don't know your D&D lore, you get the fact that, oh, we got teleported into this like wonderful magical wizard's home that he does inform them that there's nobody there, but he's been hearing noises because there's different creatures around, so that's pretty cool. He hasn't been able to go into any rooms because they were all shut. Obviously, they're open now because we've explored this area. And he also reveals the fact that he found the fact that the command words, which I believe is part of the book in Area M5. Yeah, it's a whole lot of information. Now, and I want to do it through dialogue versus the party just having to like search around these books, because I don't know if it'd be pretty clear that like, oh, well, I'm going to start doing research here, right? Like, especially characters who are more like active versus like I'm going to sit down and open a book during my adventure. I think it helps to have Matreus just tell that information. And it's more fun anyway to do it through dialogue versus the player just kind of, and then me saying, okay, this is what you find. So instead, the cat Matreus can explain that he's been able to paw through, and of course make it fun, like the room stinks of, cat piss and all this stuff because he's been there a while. Then some of the stuff is shredded. And that he's able to tell them about the command word, the books that they're looking for. So really, as soon as possible when they get here, you want to tell them like, okay, you're stuck. So here's your problem. You're stuck. The solution is you need to find the command word, but the word is not hidden in a single book. The word is split up into multiple books. I don't think I even told them how many books they're looking for initially. I don't think they thought to ask or anything, but they knew they had to find single letters. I did, and they did know exactly what kind of book they were looking for. So in every room they entered, they were like, all right, well, I'm going to look for that kind of book. So don't make it a big, like, mystery thing about, oh, you have to. I think one or two places I had them, like, roll perception checks or something. But for the most part, if they looked around, a room and basically walked into the room to interact with it, which whatever thing was in there, or kind of ambush creature or something, then they were able to find the book, because you don't want to leave that as a oh, you can't find it, because they need to find those letters. So they find the first one here, and then it's off to the races, where we can explore each of the rooms. And that's the fun part of D&D, because I don't know what order they're going to do things, or how they're going to explore anything. I'm not going to do necessarily a big room by room analysis in terms of what my party did necessarily. They ended up going to the basement first, actually, and we did trigger a fight scene here, which is in room M19, which was actually their first combat encounter, which is kind of the jar of specimen creatures. There was a fun tease where, in fact, it really works out well if they find the basement first, because they find like the conjuration room, which is empty, but you can see something happened here. And you can find the experimental room, or the specimen room, where they find all these like dead creatures, but one of the jars is empty, which teases another monster creature. So that's a really fun way of building that tension and horror, if they find signs of nasty creatures first, but haven't actually like fought or experienced those creatures, which is really cool. And I didn't plan it like that or anything. I did do it to where one character did spend, like, specifically be like, I'm going to search around this area for anything valuable. I had that character, because they rolled a good perception check, they did find the secret passage here. And then another character, instead of trying to solve the problem, actually just bashed it open, which was funny, and ended up getting them access to the basement. So I was pretty generous about letting them find all these kind of hidden areas and things too, just to keep the game flowing. And you want them to be able to find these things in the end, and that was a pretty fun, proactive thing to do. The claws, I think I still had 4 crawling claws. I did have it be their first action, which I think is written in there, that they unscrew the jar to unleash the slod tadpole. Which I don't know if I did use the new 2024 slot tadpole. I don't know if that actually changed or not. I did use the new 2024 imp. I should clarify, this is right now between when the 2024 rules released, but before the monster manual released. However, the player's handbook does include certain creatures that can be familiars and things that to do with the player's side of the board, which happens to be the imp and the slot tadpole are 2 of those. So we had to do a fun fight there, which was nice. We went up and explored the more rooms. Some of them they saw were, had a book in them, so we got to fight like the swarm of books here, which was fun. And I did the whole like knocking over with the bookshelves, trapping players and everything. The homunculus were, I don't think they actually exist in the 2024 edition anymore, but I wanted to keep them. I didn't know what else to replace them with, basically, and the players don't know any different. And it was also a fun idea, because they found the clay figurines first, and then they could extrapolate that these creatures are kind of harmless servants, and had some information. But what's funny is they triggered the fairy dragon thing first, and then later they talked to these guys, and then these guys warned them about the fairy dragons, which I think is always a funny thing you can do as a DM, and be like, oh, if you had gone here first, you would have gotten a warning, but just because of the order of events that you guys did. By the way, the fairy dragons I did not run as a traditional combat encounter, which it does say that they're not hostile necessarily. I think they only use their like euphoria breath. Let's see. Mischievous creatures. They fly toward the characters using their euphoria breath and flit out of danger still invisible. If they're attacked, they disengage and retreat to a safe place, invisible again if their concentration is broken. So I don't think you're supposed to run them as a straight up fight with, because if the players aren't in like hostile danger, and you're not doing like a complex trap or something, I don't really want to put you in initiative, because initiative really slows the action down, especially we're playing again on physical tabletop, which really slowed things down, because we weren't using anything. We were using the maps and tokens on Roll20, but everything else was on paper. So all the sheets, all the initiatives, all the on my end, I was using the hit points, but I would enter in the initiatives into Roll20, but otherwise everything was physical, all the dice rolls and stuff. So I wanted to cut down on the amount of combat encounters for sure. So I just had them do like their euphoria breath for somebody that stepped in, and instead of doing it like moving around, I treated that as like dancing around. So it was some kind of like charming thing, which initially they thought was plants, and then they thought, okay, maybe there's creatures in here, because detect magic could detect their visibility and all that. So more of just kind of a slight interesting danger element of a trap, I guess, with kind of mischievous creatures, but they had a fun way of solving the problem that wasn't combat related, although you could have done combat as well, which was fun. So I enjoyed that one. They did not experience the Mimic. I'm a little sad about that, but also the Mimic is pretty strong, so I can't comment on whether or not to use the Mimic or not. There is a Juvenile Mimic stat block I think you can use now. The Mimic, as designed, it does have reduced hit points. I don't know if it's that much reduced on the damage-wise. It is called Mimic Chair in here. I don't know if that's actually the same as a regular Mimic or not. I would have probably treated it as like a one-time ambush if somebody had gotten attacked, and then once the party attacks on it, I would probably honestly reduce its hit points, because the boss, like the end boss, only has like 26 hit points or something, the imp. So I probably wouldn't use that many hit points, honestly, for the Mimic Chair, which is currently at 30. But fun fact, they didn't do the Mimic because the person who explored the dining room was stealthing and rolled a really high stealth. So they didn't see the Mimic, but the Mimic didn't see them, and nobody else went to the dining room. So they never experienced the Mimic monster. So only at the very end did I have to tell them what monster was in the tube. And then upstairs, the planetarium puzzle. If I had more time to prep, I might have actually put together a more actual puzzle, because as written, it's not much of an actual puzzle. It's just, hey, you see the star map in room M12, or sorry, in M11, the laboratory, and then you see all these telescopes in M12. What I did do was even telegraph it further, made it a little bit easier, by having one of the telescopes pointing at a bright star and having that have a beam of light casting into the crystal in the middle. So one of them was already set, which is just, you play a lot of video games like that, right? Where they do a good job of like showcasing you kind of what you have to do without literally like holding your hand and walking you through the steps. So I think that's just a solid thing to do. And especially for puzzle design in D&D, it's always really, really tricky, where you don't want it to be just brain dead obvious, but you probably need to make it just a little bit easier than you think. For the most part, unless you really, really know your players and they're really good at, and you can make like us challenging word puzzles and stuff, but like really just abstract or three-dimensional puzzles or things, they can be very difficult for players to wrap their heads around. So without knowing that and how my players would respond to that, I kept the puzzle as basically being a, hey, you can just look at the star map, and then based on that knowledge, so there's no real even skill checks involved or anything, you can just move the things around. But one of my players immediately picked up on it, which was really cool, so I rewarded her for solving that puzzle and getting all the things put in the right direction. The animated chain library is crazy strong for this adventure. It's really cool. It's got its own token and everything, but it is just ridiculously powerful for level 1. First of all, I mean, it's basically the boss fight here. It does have an important letter to where they have to grab it. Basically, because of the amount of combat in this dungeon already, which I guess I should tally which combat fights we actually did. And by the time we got to the upstairs, it was getting later. So what I did is treat this as a trap, basically. I did not have them roll initiative. So one person kind of, and it does a good job of telegraphing that it's dangerous, right? It's got the chains all over this bookshelf. The detect magic caster is like, oh shit, this thing is all magical. It always is tricky for me, by the way, on if detect magic actually like reveals animated creatures. I wasn't quite sure on that, and you can hear my hesitation in that audio as well. Ultimately, I did give it to them though. But this creature has a 45 average hit points, 14 armor class, and makes 2 melee attacks with an average of +4, and they do 6 damage each, and it can grapple you. That is ridiculously strong for a level 1 creature. Now, my party's level 2, so they're a little bit better, but I'm thinking this is a boss fight creature, and I don't want this to be the boss fight. This is just kind of a, the challenge to grabbing this book, which you already had to solve a puzzle to do this, by the way, to get in here. So I treated it as a trap, basically. So the person who walks in and goes for the book, or even what I didn't think about is, oh, you have to grab the book, but you don't. You just like, oh, I just want to go over there and read it. So I was like, oh crap, well, I need to trigger the trap now. So as soon as basically somebody walks in the room, and this thing does have a 5-foot reach, so it just starts attacking. So essentially, the person who walks in, they have to be now. One thing I didn't think of and think my players didn't have is if somebody had mage hand. So I don't know what I would have done if somebody was clever enough to use a mage hand, because a mage hand is probably going to be able to lift a book. I don't think most books are over 10 pounds, and be able to grab it, and then that thing would have just kind of flailed out. So it would have been an interesting way of kind of solving that problem without actually taking the damage. And I might have just allowed that, but none of my party actually had mage hand, so they had to physically walk in and look at the book. And then I was able to do the attack, and I did both attacks. Both of them hit for a pretty nasty amount of damage, but the player did escape the grapple. So the interesting thing is, if they would have grappled my party, Then I may have had to do initiative, or even if I really wanted to avoid initiative, I would have said, okay, everybody else has a chance now to do an action to try and get that party out of that, get that one player out of that situation. So it would have been interesting if I had decided to throw everybody into initiative, or if I had just treated it like, okay, this is a tense situation. She just spent her action grabbing the book or looking at it. Now everybody else has a chance to respond, basically. So I did not treat this as a combat encounter to get to try to go through like 40 some hit points and actually defeat this thing. Also, I don't like that as a movement speed. I don't think it should be able to have a move at all. I think that should be one of the advantages the players has, is that it's just kind of a monster waiting there. But again, I didn't even treat it as a monster. I just treat it as a trap. So that would be my advice for that one creature. We did run the flying swords as a traditional combat fight. By the way, do note there's a lot of opportunities for the enemy to ambush the party. We were playing with 2024 rules, which I think is important because that means there is no such thing as like a surprise round or an ambush round, or the fact that I know everybody says, Eric, there's no such thing as a surprise round. Well, there kind of is, because it just means you don't get to act, when the surprise parties don't act. That's not how it works in 2024. In the 2024 rules, the surprised party, which can be the party or the enemy, they have disadvantage on initiative. So it just means you have a worse chance at going before the person who surprises you. So it's a lot less powerful for either side, which I think is important because there's a lot of ambush opportunities here. The fairy dragons can ambush. The mimic certainly ambushes. The flying swords ambush you. The animated library, if you run that as a common encounter, could ambush you. I mean, all these things are like designed to be like, oh, motionless until they attack. The crawling claws, can ambush you. Basically every single creature, except I guess the broom, which if they're smart, don't jack with the broom, it doesn't attack you. The swarm of animated books has the ability to surprise the party if they're not really paying attention or all of that. So I would definitely recommend using the 2024 rules where surprise isn't nearly as strong. So total fights we had, the flying swords was definitely 1. The swarm of animated books was 2. We had the crawling claws with the slod tadpole was 3. And then I guess we had the finale with the imp as 4. So we had 4 total combat fights for a one-shot, which is kind of a lot. None of them against like a huge ton. I guess that first one in the basement might have been the biggest, which is fun because they're all like, those claws take like 1 hit to take down. And I did not have the mimic fight, and I did not run as a fight the fairy dragons or the chain library. Those were more like out of combat, danger moments, although fairy dragons don't do damage. They just either do their color spray or they do their euphoria breath. Neither one does damage. It's kind of a way to jack with the players a little bit. So they did end up getting all the books. They did, I said, basement first, then explored the first floor, then explored the second floor. And almost immediately, once they got the 7th book, one player just glanced at it and immediately solved the riddle. So they went back to the entrance and were able to say the command word. So the way I did it here is, I teased the fact that the imp was summoned, which was true in the story. And basically, once they go through the portal, I have Matreus. He is decatified, so he appears as his human self, but he's like on all fours. And he's like hacking and coughing. And basically, he's still in the process of like coming out of being a cat, I guess. So I didn't want to have him in the final fight, in other words, as an excuse. And then the party steps through, and then the imp materializes. So the imp maybe was invisible, just watching them around. If this were a show, a movie or a TV show or something, then I definitely would have teased the fact that there's something watching them the whole time and jacking with them, and maybe there's like a little spider or a toad, whatever because the imp can shapeshift. So I would have done that for the benefit of the audience watching, but there's not really such thing as that, right? It's only the participants who are experiencing it. So if I do that, then that's going to alert to the players that like, oh, well, let's go jack with that thing, or let's go take care of it, or let's interact with it. And I wanted to make it a surprise at the end. So I like the fact that they found the conjuring room and they knew, okay, there's some kind of sulfuric demonic thing going on here. That's, so it's a slight tease. So it wasn't a complete Deus Ex like pop out of nowhere, but I didn't necessarily tease it throughout the adventure because I think that would have given it away. So they go to the portal, and then the imp materializes, says, oh, I'm free at last. I was stuck in there forever. And now I'm going to take out my wrath on all of you first, you fools, like, free me, all this, kind of villain dialogue. So it wasn't a completely out of nowhere boss fight, but the imp is a pretty solid boss fight because I used the new 2024 imp, which has an average of 21 hit points, which is twice as much as the original imp does, while still having a pretty awesome offensive ability. It can technically cast invisibility, but that takes an action, so you don't want to do that during combat. Instead, you just use its +5 to hit, and it does like 13 average damage, half of which is poison damage. So it can be pretty nasty if it hits. Now it's only a single creature, so it still goes down, relatively quick for a full party surrounding it, depending on how your party's doing. And I think it's a pretty fun little boss fight at the end against the imp. So there you have it. That is basically the adventure that I ran. It took us, so again, physical tabletop game. It took us over 3 hours to run it. We spent like 2 hours making characters first, and then we ran the adventure. And it was a unique hybrid of a digital game and physical game. As I said, I used Roll20 for the map. I basically had two laptops. My laptop running it on the DM mode, and then the players all shared a laptop that they could see the maps on their end. So we used the map on Roll20 and the tokens, and then we used physical character sheets and we rolled physical dice to basically do everything. And then I could track hit points and initiative using Roll20 digitally. And that made it really comfortable for me. I didn't have to write down any notes or scratch pad or anything like that. I could do everything digitally. And that was a cool hybrid system that I used. And I really liked the adventure. Everybody had a great time. It was really fun. It was a fun group, and we hope we can do it again at some point, but I would definitely rank this one pretty high on my list, mainly because it's really easy to run. And I think it does a cool job of showing off D&D. It doesn't use a lot of traditional, like, oh, goblins in a cave or some kind of, low-level adventure, rats in the cellar or something. It's this cool, like, wizards, like, extra-dimensional space. Wizards Mansion, I played around with the fact that, if they go outside, they see that purple miasma outside, and they feel uneasy, like they're shifting through space and everything. So it gets very magical and cool, and has a lot of creatures and things that would normally necessarily fight a lot of, constructs and stuff. So it's a little bit different, and but it's still easy because it's all in one location. So very easy for the DM to still run and keep track of everything. There's no big travel sequences or anything like that, and they're stuck in an area. And the main quest is like immediate. It's like, oh, you're stuck in this area and you have to escape. Like that's the main quest. So you find the person that you already had to find, like right off the bat, which checks that social checkbox off, and it's all like exploration and combat after that. And then, the Matreus, he can occasionally, what I do is I don't, with the NPC with them, if they wanted to ask Matreus about anything, they could be like, hey, what do you think about this? Or what's your opinion on this? But I wouldn't necessarily interject with that too often. I don't want to be too chatty as the NPC. And they were all very, very active throughout. So that was how I played it as well. But you could certainly interject more if you've got that opportunity. So yeah, that's all my advice and kind of my recap of our adventure running The Joy of Extradimensional Spaces. Big thumbs up to that. Again, you can be able to give it a listen with the mediocre audio quality that we have for running the adventure literally at my table, and then it should be up here on YouTube hopefully pretty soon or around the time that this video goes up. So thank you all so much for tuning in to this kind of video recap of an adventure that I ran from Candlekeep Mysteries. As always, shout outs to the patrons, platinum patrons, Joe, Will, Thomas, Dan, Brennan, Zenicider, Eclectic, Roleplayer, Roll, Christopher, Corey, Big Nut, John F, John L, Nathan, Kristen, Counselor, Ender, The Relevant, Stephanie, Jason, Amma, Olympus, Buds, Ward, Harold, Edmund, LLC, Tom, They're Eating the Dogs, Caleb, Marcus, Snuggy, and Jamie, and gold patrons, RPG, Paper Crafts, Pretty Boy, and Yuma, Diddles Lounge, Jerome, Nathan, Fesca, Tortoise, Scott, Ruffus, Jerry, Glenn, and Mark. Thank you all very much for your support.